Today, I'll be reacting to more of your Elden Ring hot takes. If you missed the last hot takes video, basically, I put up a poll in the community tab over here on YouTube and asked you guys to send me your Elden Ring hot takes, and I also sent a message to my Discord, so these messages are coming both from the YouTube comments and from my Discord server. Not to do too much shameless plugging here, but if you guys would like to join the Discord server, there's a link below in the description of every single video. Down there, you can find a link to the Discord, along with all my other social medias. The people in the Discord server always hear about this stuff first. If you want to hear about stuff as soon as it's happening, then that's the best place to be at. Let's not waste any more time. The first one's coming from Blue W in the YouTube comments, and they said, Elden Ring was hard until I played Sekiro, then I realized Elden Ring is easy. This is very subjective and it comes down to builds, playstyle, the whole shebang. Elden Ring, if you play the game no armor and fists only, can be one of the most grueling and painful experiences of your life, or if you use Terra Magica plus Common Dessert, well, you can blast through the game in about 2 hours. Now, obviously, patches and nerfs have a lot to do with that. Like, nowadays, if you try to go through the game with a dual Rivers of Blood build, it's not gonna be necessarily the hardest thing in the world, but it'll definitely be a lot harder than it was back at launch, when Rivers of Blood was as broken as it was. Anyway, on to the next hot take. This is coming from Alex in the YouTube comments, who says, Magic is basically easy mode. And again, I mean, while yes, I would say that it is the easy mode of the game and it is the easiest way to play the game, I wouldn't necessarily call it easy mode. You gotta remember, this is still a From Software game, and it depends on what spells and sorceries you're using. Again, if you're going like Terra Magica plus Common Dessert and you have your talisman set up right, yes, the game will be a lot easier. And compared to anything else in the game, I would call Magic the easy mode, the easiest way to play, but it's still a From Software game. It still at least takes like a little bit of skill and timing and positioning to know when to cast certain spells, especially something like Common Dessert. Like, if you're trying to use Common Dessert against Elden Beast, for example, that does take some skill and knowledge as to when you can use it, when you can't, what moves you gotta dodge. Again, it won't be the hardest thing in the world, but it'll still take at least a little bit of game knowledge to use. This one is coming from Devil Admin, Devi1 Admin. I've never known how to say their username. This one they clarified later on. This isn't their hot take, but rather this is one that they read online and just wanted to share here. Elden Ring may have doomed the traditional Metroidvania style level design of Souls games, and in so doing chained From Software to making more open world Souls games. How often can they replicate the success of Elden Ring if they can't innovate more than they already have? At which point does the innovation replace what made Souls games popular in the first place? This is very interesting, and there's like multiple layers to this. So I don't think Elden Ring necessarily doomed the original level design of the Souls games. I still feel like there's going to be other games that From Software makes, like for example, you have your Sekiros, your Bloodborns, your Dark Souls. I find it very hard to believe that they would just stick to this open world formula for every single game going forward. It doesn't seem like the From Software thing to do. Obviously, this game has set records for them. It got them the Game of the Year award. Obviously, only time will tell, and we'll have to see what their next game... Well, actually, no, you know what? The fact that they're making Armored Core 6 right now, I would say that that is proof enough in itself that they aren't focused on just chasing the bag. Again, it's a different IP, but considering the fact that it is still coming from Software and it's more of a niche series, considering the fact that if you go ask, I don't know, like a handful of people, I bet only a few of them would say that they've actually played Armored Core before. That in itself is enough to give me hope, but we'll have to see when it comes to like the actual dedicated Souls-like games. I feel like if they can find a happy medium between making their open world Souls games, like, you know, you have your Elden Ring type games, but then you also have your more like linear Metroidvania style games like the Dark Souls series, Sekiro, Bloodborne, etc. And I feel like that would be nice because honestly, as much as I love Elden Ring, the open world aspects of it has honestly killed the replayability of the game for me. Like, after the first playthrough, I really didn't want to play the game again, but then I proceeded just to blast through it, just, you know, so I can make some more content on it. But I don't know, something about the open world, it made Elden Ring feel less personal, and it stuck with me way less. Like, the game is not bad by any means. The game is absolutely phenomenal. It deserved Game of the Year. It deserves all of its praise, but there's something about the game, it doesn't really stick with me in the same way on an emotional level that all the other From Software games have up to this point. TLDR, I don't think that Elden Ring is necessarily going to lead to From Software ditching the old design of their games. I think there's a time and a place and an audience for each style of game, and I'm hoping, at least, that we'll continue to see both going forward. Don't advertise a game with hundreds of bosses with 50% of them repeating. I didn't pay $60 to fight Crucible Knight almost 30 times. This one's coming from Tyler Sheets in the YouTube comments, and yeah, I talked about that in the last Hot Takes video, so I'm not going to dwell on it too long here, but the recycled bosses in this game were just, it was too much. I understand every RPG needs a few recycled bosses, a few recycled side bosses, but when the recycled bosses start showing up in the main line of like main bosses that you need to get through the story, That's kind of what I have an issue with it. Fighting Margit like 3 times? No thank you. You fight Margit at the beginning of the game, you fight him. Now this one isn't mandatory, but you know, when you first get into the Alta Plateau, you fight him there, and then you have the actual mandatory boss fight with Morgott. And while everybody says, oh, well, Morgott has different moves in the second phase, that doesn't make it any better for me. It's still a reskin boss, and yes, it has some different moves, but honestly, the way that its moves are carried out, it basically ends up just feeling like the exact same dance as you had with Margit. I don't know, it came across as a little lazy to me. I know there's lore reasons for it, but lore does not make up for lazy design or recycled material. I would have rather got up to the top there and instead of fighting Morgott, seen Millennia there, like, I am Millennia, Blade of Mikola. Now, I'm not saying I necessarily would have wanted Millennia there. God, no, I would have hated that. I'm just trying to say I would have rather had literally any other boss there. This one coming from Barbara Fellows in the YouTube comments. Elden Ring completely ruined the otherwise far duo boss design in past Souls games. I think they meant, like, you know, the good duo boss design. I'm not really sure. In past Souls games with bosses like Godskin Duo and Valiant Gargoyles Duo compared to fun duo bosses like Ornstein and Snow. I completely agree. The duo bosses in this game were absolutely abysmal. The Gargoyles I didn't find to be that bad, but Godskin Duo, a lot of people hate on the boss saying that it's like stupidly difficult or it has like annoying mechanics, and while I agree with that, I don't think it's as bad as everybody says, but I can agree from a design perspective that these bosses are very, very weak compared to literally anything else that we've gotten from Software before in terms of duo bosses. Ornstein and Smo complemented each other. The Bile Gargoyles and Dark Souls 1, they complemented each other. The Abyss Watchers, again, everything in their design was made to complement each other. Dragon Rider and DS2. We don't talk about that one. But in this one, they just took 2 completely different bosses. Like, sure, they're both like, you know, Godskin. You got the Godskin Apostle and the Godskin Noble. You got these 2 random bosses, and you just kind of stitch them together. And again, while lore-wise, they're, you know, they're meant to be together, I guess you could say, like, you know, because they're both of the Godskin name. In action, it really doesn't work. And don't even get me started on the respawn mechanic. Like, in terms of the combat itself, I can live with it. It's not the worst thing in the world. They were trying to go for an Ornstein and Smo thing, but in the end, it really didn't work. Something about the way that they end up moving and fighting beside each other that it really doesn't work. And again, I'm not one of the people that struggles with this fight. I find this fight to be just fine as it is. Like, it's not overly difficult for me. I understand the boss. It's just looking at it from a critical standpoint. These bosses, they don't work as well together as literally any other duo boss that From Software has done, aside from, like, Dragon Rider. And the respawn mechanic was just so lazy. I've said this time and time again. Why is there a respawn mechanic? They could have just increased the health of both of them. Could you imagine if they just increased the health of Fat Boy and increased the HP on Lanky Boy? It really wouldn't have been as bad as it is now, but one of the most annoying parts to me in this fight is when you're fighting one of them, you get them down, then you go to fight the other one, but then while you're fighting the other one respawns, and say you miss an audio cue or you just don't hear it coming in because of the battle that's taking place right in front of you, and then you start getting hit from the side, and it becomes this cluster real quick, and it's not fun. I've seen people say, well, if you stay close to him, if you keep attacking him, they won't respawn the other. Go back and watch my Elden Ring playthroughs. When I fought the Godskin Duo, there was times where I was on their ass, staying as close as I could, trying to attack as much as I could before my stamina ran out, and they still ended up respawning the other one. Then some people will say, oh, sleep pots. I mentioned this in the last Hot Takes video. I can't get behind that. The boss's difficulty and the optimal way to fight a boss shouldn't come down to gimmicks or outside items. It should come down to you and your skill in the fight. If you disagree, then that's okay. You have fun with your gimmick bosses. I'm just gonna keep playing the old Dark Souls games that relied on actual good game design. Elden Ring is overrated because it's open world. This one coming from ICUP in the YouTube comments. Overrated because it's an open world? I mean, maybe the open world had something to do with the fact that the game then became more accessible, and maybe that's also part of why it drew in more players, because obviously everybody loves their big, giant, breathing, living open worlds, or whatever Ubisoft says. I wouldn't necessarily say the open world is the reason it's overrated, but I would say that the open world definitely played into how big the game got and how accessible it was, and a lot of its success. I wouldn't necessarily even call Elden Ring overrated, but I would say that Elden Ring does get a little bit too much praise. Because to me, there's a bit of a difference when it comes to talking about something that's overrated and something that gets praised just like a bit too much with a lot of ignorance from the fan base. Like, for example, everybody in the fan base is always like, Elden Ring is a perfect game, it's a 10 out of 10. And to say something that is a 10 out of 10, that is already objectively incorrect unless you yourself can think of absolutely 0 flaws that exist in the game. To say a game is a 10 out of 10 means that you think it is a perfect game. Nothing can be improved upon. There is no flaws with the game. It is an absolute perfect masterpiece. And for me, I can think of multiple things right now. Many of the bosses relying on gimmicks to be able to defeat them efficiently. Freezing pots for millennia, the drinking your flask from Moog, Fire Giant existing in the first place. Oh, and don't even get me started on having to fight the camera in half of the boss fights in these games, especially the bigger enemies. I'm not gonna go on with that, but yeah, there's a few things off the top of my head that I can already think of that are flaws in the game. Replayability being not so hot after like New Game Plus 1. Like after you beat the game the first time, you might have a bit of an urge to go back like 1 or 2 more times, but after that, oh god. I know a lot of the fan base agrees that like after New Game Plus 2 especially, it's just like it starts to become daunting to even want to play the game anymore because there's not much else to do at that point. Like there's a lot to do in the game, but at the same time, it's like there's nothing to do. Does that make any sense? Because at that point, you've seen everything, so it's like, well, why would I go out of my way to do this, that, and the other? Hard to explain, but if you've played the game and if you've done everything and you're sitting at like New Game Plus 4 or 5 right now like I am, then you understand what I'm talking about. I have also platinumed the game at this point, so I've put some hours in. Elden Ring is superior to the Souls titles in every way. I'm gonna have to disagree with that one, Chief. Nostalgia makes people cling to the DS series. Only Bloodborne and Sekiro can compete against Elden Ring in terms of quality. Yeah, I would have to disagree on that one. This one coming from JM Cord in the YouTube comments, and yeah, I gotta disagree, so let's break this down. Elden Ring superior to the Souls titles in every way. I would say these Souls titles have better atmospheres. I would say Dark Souls 3 in particular has better bosses. Dark Souls 1 and 3 both have better soundtracks. Obviously, the things that I'm saying right now are completely subjective. I'm not saying that you are wrong because you are not wrong. You are entitled to your opinion. Everybody in this video that has been featured is entitled to their own opinions. This is just me reacting and giving my opinion. Nostalgia making people cling to the DS series. I started playing Souls games not even like, what, 2 or 3 months ago, so it's definitely not a nostalgia thing for me. Only Bloodborne and Sekiro can compete against Elden Ring in terms of overall quality. I have not completed Bloodborne, and I have yet to play Sekiro, so I can't speak on this fully, but I would say that the Dark Souls games in themselves do actually compete in terms of overall quality. In fact, I would say any of the Soulsborne games made by From Software can compete in terms of overall quality, because the games themselves, they're all quality. In fact, I would say more so the other games, because when looking at Elden Ring compared to the other games, Elden Ring is filled with much more filler and quantity versus quality, whereas the other games, they were much smaller experiences, so the focus was entirely on the quality rather than the quantity. But then you get to Elden Ring and you deal with all of the recycled bosses and the absolutely dead areas. Like, everything in the last quarter of the game serves basically absolutely no purpose in terms of the areas themselves besides to serve as one big boss rush arena. I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means, but it definitely leaves those areas being way less memorable in the end. Consecrated Snowfield, Mountaintop of the Giants. Please name me one reason that you'd actually want to go there aside from like a few quests maybe that involve those locations. I can think of so many things and reasons to go to any other area in the game, but when it comes to something like Consecrated Snowfield or Lanedale Ashen Capital, sure, there's a few items here and there, but besides from like some sweet aesthetics, they don't got nothing on the robustness of the first couple areas in the game. Liurnia, Limgrave, Caelid, Altus Plateau, they all stomp on the end of the game. Oh, and the underground areas like Siofa River, chef's kiss. So again, this is completely subjective. I respect your opinion, and this is just mine. This one coming from Genies in the YouTube comments. The quality of Sekiro as a whole is better than Elden Ring because of the peak combat and battle diversity. So I, again, haven't played Sekiro, so I can't speak on this, but I would probably bet that to be the case because, again, it is a much more linear and small experience, which means that they were able to put much more focus, budget, and creativity into each and every little inch of the game and make it a much more streamlined and just quality experience through and through, especially considering the fact that they didn't have to account for so many different things. Like in Elden Ring, they had to balance around the spirit summons and the different builds, all these different factors, and considering it's open world, they'd have to be like, okay, well, at what point in the game are they actually getting to this area? And there was a lot to balance there, but with Sekiro just being like a streamlined, linear experience, that led to them being able to make a much more refined experience through and through. Pretty well balanced for the most part, and considering the fact that there's very few weapons in the game, they were able to refine that combat to a T. And yeah, again, considering I haven't played Sekiro, I can't speak on this, but I could totally see this being a valid point. This one coming from Jake Armitage, I think that's how you say it from the YouTube comments. It's a great game for the first half, but quickly loses charm at the later end. Players often find themselves forced to finish it rather than interested and engaged in the ending. Maybe the DLC will be better. I completely agree with this to an extent. So for the second half, I didn't find myself feeling necessarily forced to finish it, and I was still interested and engaged by the end. However, I did also manage to beat the game in like 30 hours, so I wasn't completely burnt out by the end. But for somebody that went into this like completely blind and spent like hundreds of hours in the game, I could totally see that being the case. Especially like I previously explained, like by the time that you get to Furamazula in itself is still an S tier area to me. At that point, the areas get smaller, things get more linear, there's less to do in the areas. Furamazula, less because there is still quests out of that area, like you have the Alexander quest there, and then you can go off and find Pseudosax. That is definitely when things start to narrow a bit. And again, Furamazula for me is like an S tier area. Absolutely love that place. But as soon as you leave Furamazula, the game is, well, at that point, the game is essentially over. And then the last area, there's literally nothing to it besides like one mega boss rush. And there's not necessarily anything bad about that. But even before you get to Furamazula, now that I think of it, like the mountaintops of the giants, basically actually everything after Altus Plateau is kind of when it goes downhill. I was talking about this in the last video too, but it's funny how there's parallels between this game and Dark Souls 1, where in Dark Souls 1, after the Golden City, that being Anor Londo, things start to kind of go down in terms of quality and like how well the game holds up in its second half, and that is the case for Elden Ring as well, because after Altus Plateau, now that I'm thinking of it again, the Consecrated Snowfield, nothing to do there. The mountaintops of the giants, I could live without it. And then Furamazula, things start to get a bit more linear, and then you get to the Ashen Capital, and it is what it is. Again, these areas aren't bad by any means, but it definitely starts to lose the charm that it had in the first half of the game. I can completely agree with that. For me, it's a very interesting dynamic, because the charm from Elden Ring comes from its open world and how free you are to explore and do all these different things. But for some reason, once I got to those final areas like Furamazula, that's when I started to actually like the game more. Like, up to that point, I liked the game, but by the end, I ended up loving it. Like, the intense boss fights, the level design felt more like a actual Souls game. So it's kind of this weird dynamic where, yes, in terms of the charm of Elden Ring, it did lose its open world charm by the end. But by that endpoint, that's actually when I started to like the game. And again, like I said, I obviously loved the game before that, but like once I got to that point, it was just like epic boss battles, you know, the typical Souls level design. That's when I started to be like, yes, this is it. Maybe I'm just weird about that. I don't know. This one coming from Mason Irving in the YouTube comments, and they are also a channel member, so thank you. Much love. But they say, I actually like the Millennia fight. You know, Millennia, she's an okay boss. I mean, she's stupidly easy, honestly. The only thing that makes her hard is Waterfowl, and once you learn about freezing pots and you throw them at her anytime that the debuff goes away, well, she's an absolute joke. You can get her down to like 2 minutes, including both of the phases. Not to say she's a bad boss, like especially lore-wise, I really love her lore. In terms of game mechanics itself, yeah, I can take it or leave it. It's an okay boss. It's just an easy boss that relies on one gimmick to make it tough. This one also coming from Mason Irving in the YouTube comments, and they said Godfrey has the best lore. Again, I would say that, you know, best lore and things of that nature are subjective, but I can completely respect that. Godfrey has some pretty sick lore. When it comes to my favorite lore in the game, I don't know, I really like the whole, like, family tree, we'll call it, between, like, Radagon and Renala and Marika and the Red Wolf and all that. I just love how everything is, like, connected in that way, but, like, when it comes to, like, specific characters, I could totally respect Godfrey being your favorite lore-wise. Alright, so it's getting to that time again where we still have a lot of hot takes to go through. I thought that we would have been able to get through more in this video, and I mean, we've been going through a good bit in this video, yet there's still just more. I underestimated just how many you guys sent me, so if you guys want a part 3, let me know, and maybe also hit me with a few extra hot takes, because I don't know if I necessarily have enough for a whole other video, but it's at least enough for another, like, 3/4 of a video. These last few were coming from Discord members, so the first one comes from Ank in the Discord server, who says, Katanas are overrated AF, and pole blades are just better. I can totally see that, especially considering the fact that Katanas have been nerfed into the ground ever since the game launched. Yeah, I can totally respect that. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't used too many Katanas or pole blades or anything like that. I also go on to say, Eleanor's pole blade is better than Rivers of Blood. Again, I haven't even used the pole blade, so I can't speak on it, but I respect that. And then the last 4 coming from Lisi in the Discord server. The Godskin duo fight isn't that bad. Nobo's really funny, and if you kill him first and have decent DPS, you can kill them in mostly 1v1 encounters. Again, we talked about that earlier on. Yeah, the Godskin duo fight, I really don't find it to be that bad, especially if you're using a well-optimized build. They really shouldn't be a problem, New Game 0 or not. Number 2, Commander Nile is the worst boss in the game, main game, including basically if a boss has remembrance or achievement behind it. I wouldn't say he's the worst boss in the game. I would say that still goes to something like Fire Giant. Really didn't like him, but I can totally respect that. The Frostbite gets really annoying. Consecrated Snowfields is the worst area in the game, 100% agree. There was absolutely no reason for this area to exist besides to serve as an in-between point between getting from the secret lift up to the town of Ordina, which that place in itself is also an F tier, just because, I mean, that town literally serves no purpose besides being one massive puzzle so you can finally gain access to the Halleck tree. And then number 4, this ain't really that bad of a take, but strength and dex builds are way more fun and rewarding and satisfying than Ents, Faith, and Arcane builds. Again, I can't really speak on that. I would say that that's more subjective than anything. It really comes down to your playstyle and what you look for from these games. Like me personally, I do find strength and dex builds to be way more fun, but I do know other players that find it fun to cast these like really big, long, wind-up face builds and like, you know, set these giant lightning beams at their enemies. Personally, I've also had some fun with arcane builds. I mean, you know, you got Mogun's Sacred Spear, which as cheesy as it is, it's pretty fun to use, and then Dual Rivers of Blood. I have a lot of fun with that. So yeah, I'd say that's pretty subjective. It just comes down to the player, what they're looking for, their playstyle. Again, we still have a decent number to go, so if you guys want a part 3, let me know. These videos are actually really fun to make, and I love getting to involve you guys in the videos like this. I haven't done too many videos like this in the past where I get to involve you guys, whether it be through like doing polls or taking comments like this, but I really like this. If you guys just want more videos like this in general, let me know. I will totally do it. Before we wrap this up, please guys, try to stay civil and don't start too many wars in the comments. Please. Anyway, as always, a shout out to the patrons and channel members: Carmen's Fig Grandma, Lil Booty Tab, Big Daddy Matty, Chilbosaurus Rex, Razak, Polar Ray, De Webster, Lil Mouse, Bianca, Purgatory, Drip Cassant, Mellow Laskin, Computer Magic, Mason Irving, TGRY15, Flamus71, and Aaron Reynolds. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. And remember, don't go hollow. Peace.